Good evening to all the Dharma Masters and Lotus friends. Namo Amituofo. Chen would like to share a true story based on the Chinese translation by Master Foke of an extract from the Tale of Butsumoan. Its title is Even the Wicked Are Embraced. Amitabha's light reaches the depths of hell. I once traveled to Osaka City to visit Yoshi Zawa, a Dharma practitioner. Upon my arrival, he informed a fellow practitioner who came with an elderly woman named Aboshi. I spoke the Dharma for about half an hour, when suddenly Aboshi murmured to herself. So, he was already embraced by the light. Her words struck me deeply. I stopped my Dharma talk and listened as she shared her story for the next 2.5 hours. She began, "My husband was a violent man, and for years I suffered from terrible chest pain due to that. But recently, the worst happened. Our 20-year-old son died. He had fallen in with bad elements and was loathed by the entire village. Eventually, he developed a heart condition that worsened quickly. In his final days, his pain was so unbearable I couldn't stand watching it. One day, he grabbed a kitchen knife and pleaded, 'Please, cut my throat.' The agony lasted nearly an hour. As he lay in torment, I said to him, 'Son, the pain you are feeling now is nothing compared to what waits ahead. The sufferings in hell are a million times worse than anything this world knows.' Upon hearing that, he wept and said to me, 'Mother, please, tell me how I can be saved.' I heard his plea, but held back my emotions and kept silent for nearly an hour. All the while, my son was in tears, begging with all his might. When I sensed his final moment was near, I leaned in and said, 'Amitabha Buddha is full of compassion. He opens his arms to embrace even those destined for hell and leads them to the land of ultimate bliss quickly.' At these words, my son's tear-filled eyes lit up with joy. He began reciting Amitabha's name without pause. I chanted the gatha of true faith by his side. The doctor had predicted he would pass away by 10 that night. But when the hour came, he did not die. Instead, he seemed to have drifted into a peaceful sleep. The next day, at around 2 in the afternoon, my son opened his eyes wide. He was still chanting Amitabha's name. He called everyone to gather by his bedside and said, "You should all be willing to learn the Buddha's teaching." He then spoke his parting thoughts on many worldly matters, so unlike the wayward habits he had shown over the years. I felt the moment had come, so I stood before Amitabha Buddha and chanted the gatha of true faith once more. My son heard me. Upon finishing the gatha, I said the dedication of merits verse from the Pure Land tradition. May the merit of this practice be shared equally with all beings, that together we may awaken the body mind. And before I could finish the last line of the dedication verse, my son passed away. Therefore, instead of reciting the last line, "May we be reborn in the land of peace and joy," I softly said, "A bodhisattva has just departed." I broke down in tears, my head buried in my hands. For a long time after that, I drifted away from Amitabha Buddha, no longer reciting his name. The old woman, Aboshi, recounted this sorrowful chapter from her past, laying bare her emotions. It must have been a release from years of grief. I was thinking what wondrous Dharma she was imparting on her son during his darkest hour, even though he pleaded, "Tell me how I can be saved." She let him endure another hour of pain. I realized that in choosing to let her son endure another hour of extreme suffering before telling him how to be saved, Aboshi was trying to make sure that the Buddha's teaching was effectively transmitted at the right time. When her son was finally ready for it, it was an act of reverence to honor the teaching itself. It's an example of skillful means, teaching the Dharma according to the mental state and capacity of a son. I was deeply moved. This article is translated by the Pure Land translation team and edited by householder for Jing. Now, let's analyze Aboshi's account of her son's passing that I had just shared. We can confirm that her son had taken rebirth in the Pure Land through the various events that play out and can be backed up by the Contemplation Sutra. According to Aboshi's description, her son's conduct corresponds exactly to the sentient beings of the lower level of the lower grade that described in the Contemplation Sutra. Not only did he not study Buddhism, but he also committed all kinds of evil acts and created heavy negative karma. As the sutra states, those are sentient beings who commit unwholesome karmic deeds, the 5 gravest transgressions, the 10 evil actions, and various other offenses. Due to their negative karma, these ignorant beings are fated to fall into the wretched realms to undergo many kalpas of endless suffering. Aboshi did not specify the exact severe offenses her son committed, but she could say with certainty that at the time of his death he was destined to fall into the hell realm. When her son approached the end of his life, filled with fear and helplessness, he wept and repented, asking his mother to teach him the path to liberation. But she ignored him, not because she lacked compassion, but because the practice of reciting the Buddha's name is an extremely rare and precious Dharma. Allowing her son to endure one more hour of suffering will help him truly cherish this supreme teaching, thus enabling it to reach him effectively. Therefore, his mother explained to him the wondrous method of Amitabha's salvation and taught him to recite the Buddha's name. The Contemplation Sutra continues. As these ignorant beings approach death, they encounter a Dharma friend who consoles them in every way, speaks the wondrous Dharma, and teaches them to invoke Amitabha Buddha. His mother was precisely this Dharma friend, guiding him to recite the Buddha's name. The sutra further says, with unbroken voice, they call Namo Amitabha Buddha 10 times. Since they recite the Buddha's name, thought by thought, their reincarnation fettered negative karma accumulated over 8 billion kalpas is eradicated. At the point of death, they see a golden sunlight lotus appear before them. In a flash, they are reborn in the land of bliss. How do we know whether he eliminated 8 billion kalpas of karmic offenses? How do we know whether he was embraced by the Buddha's light? Remember that before the elderly woman even began telling her story, she murmured, so he was already embraced by the light. The doctor also said that her son should have passed away at 10 o'clock, but because he gave rise to joy and continuously recited the Buddha's name, he instead felt no bodily pain and peacefully slept until the next day. This clearly shows that through reciting the Buddha's name, he was embraced by Amitabha's light. All unbearable bodily pain disappeared, and his karmic obstacles were removed. This is precisely Amitabha's light that embraces those who recite the Buddha's name without ever abandoning them. At the moment his mother dedicated the merit, he passed away peacefully. Thus, she said, I have sent off a bodhisattva. Another bodhisattva has been reborn in the land of ultimate bliss to become a Buddha. This son is just like the sentient beings of the lower level of the lower grade described in the Contemplation Sutra. Amitabha gives immeasurable hope to all sentient beings, no matter how heavy the karma they have committed, as long as they sincerely repent, recite the Buddha's name, and rely on Amitabha's powerful vow. Their karmic obstacles can be eradicated, enabling them to be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. This concludes tonight's sharing. Namo Ami Tuofo.